Doña Juana horror story. Good afternoon, Rede. I hope you can publish my story. My name is Anna. I am 18 years old now. The following story happened when I was 14. I am very interested in paranormal topics because, despite not being such a big person, I have lived some experiences, and I have even heard stories from relatives that allow me to believe in this phenomenon. So, well, this is my story. I have always been a person who has spent my time living from one place to another. Due to my dad's jobs, which have not lasted long, I have known many places, and I have also got to know the beliefs and customs of the people. Since I was a child, my parents have not instilled in me a religion as such. They have respected my decision, although they have also made me see that I have to respect the ideas of others. This story has made me doubt a lot about what I should believe in. Although I am sure that, as well as there is good, there's evil, I have always wondered, how is it that some people are allowed to always hurt people? Before I begin to relate one of the worst experiences I have had at my young age, I must add that my immediate family consists of my older sister, who at the time was 17 years old, my mom, and my dad. I have never considered that we are a family of money. Far from it. There have been complicated times, but we have managed to get ahead. My parents have always tried to make sure that the food on our table is never lacking. That is why we have continually changed houses, going from the city to some villages, meeting many people with the best and the worst intentions. My mother has always been a very sociable person, so it has never been difficult for her to make friends with the neighbors. During one of these sudden changes of home, when we had to go to live for a while in a small town, my mom met an old lady. I don't remember her age exactly, but she seemed to be over 70 years old. Everyone called her Doña Juana. That person, to be honest, and no offense, always caused me a strange feeling. It was as if she scared me. In fact, my sister used to joke with me about that lady would take me away or something like that if I misbehaved. This time, due to Dad's job, we were in a more rural area than the previous ones. We had never been in a place like this before, and we were having a hard time adjusting. The house was quite big. My father told us that not many people were interested in living in it, and with good reason. Next to our house, we had two neighbors. On one side lived a man over 40, who was dedicated to the care of his sheep. And on the other side, we had an elderly couple. They were really very quiet neighbors and always behaved very kindly with us. Doña Juana lived across the street from us. Not so close, but relatively close, since at least we could clearly see her door and windows. She lived alone. She said that her husband had passed away some years ago due to an illness, and that she had never been able to get pregnant, no matter how hard she tried. She had an unkempt appearance. Her hair was abundant and gray. She always wore dirty and torn clothes, but of course we did not judge her appearance. We thought that maybe she was still not over the loss of her husband, and that made her that way. She was always leaving her house. In fact, it was difficult to find her, especially in the evenings. My sister and I would come home from school right at lunchtime, and with the quietness of the place, we could even hear her leaving, as she would always bang on her door and leave, swearing as if she was upset. She was very jealous with her things. She did not allow anyone to come near her house. If she saw someone even passing by, she would go out and throw stones at him, while she would throw insults and come back upset. It was something almost every day. One day, to our surprise, the lady came to knock on our door. She had never done anything like that before, even though she had a good friendship with my mother, which was quite surprising because of her character. She did not go to visit us. She usually started talking with my mother outside the house or when they went to do the errand. She always told us that Doña Juana was a very serious person because of everything she had gone through in her life, that she had told her about her parents' beatings and a difficult life in which she had had many shortcomings. So that day, it was quite strange that she went to knock. She was looking for my mother. She was going out of town for a few days, since the only sister she had was very sick. Even my mom didn't know she had a sister. It was quite strange, since, as I said before, she used to be very aggressive with her things. Nobody knew her house. Well, we couldn't even get close. Finally, after talking for a while, he convinced her, since he also offered to pay my mom to take care of his house, which we didn't look down on. Extra money wouldn't hurt the household at all. My parents argued about my mother's decision, while he told her that it was a bad idea because it would neglect our house. She explained that earning a little money would not be bad. My mom thought it was a good idea to take the two of us to Doña Juana's house, because that way my dad would not have to deal with us. Basically, he was hardly ever at home. He had a job that sometimes made him be away for 2 days, so there would be no problem and my mom would receive a little help from her daughters to clean the disturbing house of the lady. The next day, we would settle in. Doña Juana left in the afternoon, almost at night. She left on a Saturday. I remember it perfectly. My sister and I had to help my mother pass clothes, food, and everything we would need for our stay. The house itself was gloomy. It was a rather neglected adobe house, as we could not get close to it. We could not realize how bad it was. It was as if no one had lived there in a long time. We entered something we never thought would happen, and the truth is that it was a very humble home. But we also noticed that the lady could give it a different look. It was as if she liked it to look like that. The house had a couple of rooms with no windows. The only windows were next to the door, but they were covered with black cloth. Evidently, there was light, like in the other houses, but the light there seemed weaker, of a very warm yellow color. I will never forget all these details. It was a place I never thought of entering, much less sleeping there and having experienced all those things. We realized that the lady had kept something in her room. We could see the silhouette of some furniture that was not in its place. We thought that maybe she was afraid that we would steal or damage it. She had made it very clear in the directions she gave my mother that she was going to lock her room and that it was basically forbidden for us to go in there. It was understandable, since people tend to have their privacy, and there are things that sometimes we don't want people to see. As I said, there were 2 rooms. One was the lady's bedroom, and the other was a room that only housed a black plastic bag. Leaning on one of the corners, a strange figure of a kind of material like porcelain, which was also on the floor, and stickers almost about to fall off, stuck to the wall, with images of what seemed to be saints or something like that. But far from that, it had nothing, not even furniture or a bed on the floor. It even looked like they had burned something. By this point, it seemed that my mom was a little sorry for agreeing to take care of the house. I think she already sensed what was hidden there. But we, in our innocence, or at least I, was not able to realize things. My mother decided to give all this a chance, and thought that if she had already accepted, we would have to stay there and do our part. After all, Doña Juana had already paid her. The inside of the house was an unsettling place. You could feel a very strange cold, which was not even outside. This seemed very strange to us, since there were no windows in that room and the only ones we had were covered. It did not seem possible. We reconsidered the issue of sleeping on the floor. Not having a bed, we were forced to bring some blankets and lie on the floor. The cold seemed to be increasingly intense. That was definitely not normal. But anyway, we decided to turn off the light and sleep. Tomorrow would be another day. In the morning, when my mom was preparing breakfast, she noticed something that seemed not to be there the day before. That is, next to the front door, there was a vase, navy blue in color, with some white spots. But it was very strange, since the three of us were sure that it was not there when we entered the house. It was as if it had appeared at night. When we saw the inside, we realized that it contained a green liquid, quite dark, and had a horrible smell. It even made us feel very nauseous. For my mom, all these things were warning signs. The vase had been another sign that maybe we were not in the right place. And not only talking about that lady's house, but maybe during the time we had been living there, we had had a very strange neighbor who was hiding many things. My mom, seeing the situation, decided to go talk to the neighbors. They had been there longer, and obviously they would know a little more about this woman. She told us she would come out to it, and to try not to touch any more things. I do not consider myself a person who is easily frightened. In fact, throughout my life, I feel that I have become stronger and have been able to withstand more of the supernatural things I have experienced. My sister, on the other hand, is different. Despite being older than me, she gets scared of anything. It took her a lot to adapt to the environment of that house, since by her friends she had received some warnings about what could be found there. There are so many legends that we have in Mexico that it is very difficult to get to a town and think that something similar could not happen to you. Mom returned after a while. She had not found anyone. The only neighbors we had, and who were always at home, now, curiously, seemed to be gone. My father was not going to return until Monday night. Whenever he went out to work, he lost a lot of contact with us, and it was a reality that in the town, there was not a very good signal. But anyway, we had already got used to it. So basically, at that moment, it was the three of us, taking care of someone else's house, which hid many things and belonged to a mysterious woman, who we didn't even know when she was coming back. Since she hadn't given my mom a date, she had only mentioned that she would be back in a few days. When her sister was feeling better, without any better indication other than that we shouldn't try to open her room. That day, we tried to make the best of it. We tried to clean up a bit despite the indications, to forget about what we had seen the night before and that morning, and that the best thing to do was to keep the deal, wait for Dad, and find ourselves calmer. It had barely been a night and half a day. Sunday afternoon had gone by trying to clean up, make lunch, and of course, also keep an eye on our house. Although, after all, we were very close. We decided not to touch the subject. My sister, by that point, was quite scared, and it seemed that she didn't want the night to come. I was also a little scared, but I didn't want to show it, to give more security to my mother, who seemed to have forgotten things a little. We talked for a few hours, trying to remember moments from when we were younger. We laughed for a while. It seemed that the situation had improved. At nightfall, and with a little more calm, we waited for the cold that had been the previous day. But it was not like that. On the contrary, it seemed that it was warmer than usual. We prepared the blankets to sleep. We turned off the lights. Everything was ready. It was time to rest. I could not fall asleep. I was moving around for a while, tossing and turning. My mom and my sister seemed to be asleep. Just above my head was the black bag. which we had seen when we entered the room. In the desperation of not sleeping, I moved up and my head touched a bag without wanting to move it, and it fell to one side. I only felt a shiver and a kind of sting in the neck. Whatever was inside fell, and it was right next to me. In the darkness, I could feel that it was a kind of hair, long and thick. I got up screaming, and in the desperation of not being able to see anything, my sight sharpened, and I can assure you that I saw the image of Mrs. Juana in the doorframe, staring at us, although between my screams, the desperation to find the damper, and my mother and my sister getting up. Quickly, I could see how that silhouette vanished. I turned on the light as I could and pointed to where the bag was, without saying anything to me, and pale from the shock of my screams. They looked at how that bag contained hair in abundance. It looked like the typical hair that one finds in the shower, but in excess. The three of us ran away. From the bag, which was already releasing a liquid very similar to the one we found in the vase. At that moment, something hit the ceiling hard. It was more as if something quite heavy had fallen from a great height. On the house, there was nothing. There was not even a tree nearby. Obviously, we were very frightened. My mother and my sister began to cry out of despair. I could not cry, but I felt that my heart was escaping from my chest. Along with my hurried heartbeat, I could hear the sound of that thing on the ceiling, pounding, recurrently, and louder and louder. My mother began to pray. She took us by the hands and kissed our cheeks with desperation. The little light that gave the house's bulbs began to fade. Until it disappeared, we were in the dark again. And as it faded, we could hear a laughter coming from the ladies' room. Yes, that forbidden room to which we didn't even have access. I think I speak for the three of us at that moment when I say that we felt that our soul was leaving our body. We hugged each other and started screaming, crying desperately, and even my sister was scratching my back in despair. The macabre laughter that echoed in that room belonged to Mrs. Juana. We could notice it in the timbre of her voice. My mother begged her to leave us alone, and with rage in her words, she insulted her in 1,000 possible ways. Everything had suddenly calmed down now. There were no more blows, no more laughter. We were still paralyzed with fear. We could not move, but it seemed that everything had calmed down. However, it was not like that. Outside, there was a kind of light that had been able to give light through the fabrics that hung behind the windows, but it was sudden, a light that seemed to be born from the ground and disappeared in the air. It is something I will never forget. They were eternal moments. Maybe only a few minutes had passed, but for us, it was eternal. Suddenly outside the house, we heard some shots in the air and some screams, but of course we could recognize that voice. It was Mr. Jose, our neighbor, the lonely and kind man who, at that moment, gave us back all the sense of calm possible. Among the silence of the night and all the chaos that had happened, we could hear him cursing Doña Juana, saying all kinds of insults and calling her witch from hell. Doña Juana. A horror story. I have never been more grateful in my life, as I was at that moment with that gentleman who, in spite of the fact that I never got to know him very well, was always very kind to us. We ran out of there. My mother, still with tears in her eyes, went straight to hug that man and thank him infinitely for helping us. I honestly don't know what we would have done if it wasn't for this person. We were totally defeated, scared to death, trembling. It was practically a miracle. That night, something changed inside us. I think we were never the same again. We never imagined experiencing something so strong and unexpected, especially from someone who my mom practically considered her friend. No doubt we can run into very bad people with the worst intentions or even worse. With many things to hide, this lady never showed her true side. Yes, she was always reserved, with a somewhat creepy appearance and very bad-tempered. But ultimately, we never expected that she was a person who was dedicated to witchcraft, and even less that she wanted to hurt us. When we left the house and found Mr. Jose in his shotgun, he tried to reassure us. He told us that everything would be fine and that we could stay at his house. He mentioned that after the scare he gave the witch, he would hardly come back. Anyway, he told us that we should be prepared for any circumstance. We entered her house, and she taught us that we should put a mirror on a table, place it upwards, and place a pair of scissors in a cross on it. That this would be a great remedy to prevent her from coming back. After all that had happened, what more did it cost us to believe that it was true? We decided to listen to him, and we did. We couldn't sleep, and to be honest, I think it took me a couple of nights to sleep. We spent the whole night talking about the man's life. We tried to drink some tea or some other remedy that would make us lose our fear. As soon as dawn broke, we tried to communicate with my dad. As I said, the signal was not very good, and we had had many unsuccessful attempts. We could not explain anything to him on the phone. My mom told him that it was an emergency situation, that he had to return immediately. That same day, my dad was coming back that night. But evidently, when he heard my mom so nervous, he decided to come back earlier. My dad came back, and we felt an enormous tranquility when we saw him. We felt protected. The three of us hugged him and cried. We told him everything that had happened. Of course, at the beginning, he did not believe us. But when he saw all our actions and heard what Mr. Joss had to say, he believed us. When we returned home, we noticed that there was a very strange figure at the door. It happened like the vase thing. It was something that was not there the day before. It appeared out of nowhere. My mom asked my dad to leave. She didn't want to spend one more night there, and obviously, neither did we. It took my dad a couple of days to anticipate at work that he couldn't be in town anymore. He took us out of school. It was something usual. After a few nights in which nothing strange happened, and of course, the lady was not coming back, we decided to put an end to this chapter of our lives. We left with a very strong story and a great lesson. We learned to be stronger, to be more united, and above all, we learned not to trust anyone and to choose better our friendships, because we never know what we can find. Thank you for joining us for this spine-tingling story. We hope you found it both thrilling and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this video, please consider participating in our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with your friends. Your support goes a long way in helping us create more engaging content for you. Goodbye, and may you always tread carefully in the world of the unknown.